I recently heard a saying which was, we figure out who we are in the process of learning about our ancestors. And I really feel like this is something that I can relate to, because when I first found out that my biological grandfather wasn't the man that I thought it was, my major concern was about feeling lost. My major concern was that I perhaps came from people who weren't nice. And the reality was that I wanted to learn about those people so that I could find out whether they were nice people or not. It really didn't matter that I consider myself to be a nice person. So in April of last year, I found out that my biological grandfather was someone who's different from the man that I expected it to be. My whole life, I had been told I was just like my mother's father's mother. So I grew up believing that a lady called Lucy was my great-grandmother because she was my grandpa's mum. And she loved to be in the kitchen. And for anyone that knows me, I absolutely adore being in the kitchen. I like cooking, I like entertaining, I like having people over, I like cooking for them. I want to make them feel like they're accepted into my home, and I want them to know that I've made something special for them. And this was a trait that I knew came from my grandpa Tom's mum. And I had been just told my entire life, oh, you're just like your great-grandmother Lucy. Now, I didn't necessarily look like all of my relatives. And what I mean there is my cousin Tish is really skinny and she's darker skinned than I am. And everyone always used to say she looked like my grandma. So when I was told I was just like my grandpa Tom's mum, I was like, of course I am. Like, yeah, Tish is like grandma and I'm like grandpa's mum. And I loved that. I thought that, everything that anyone said about Lucy was amazing. They always said she was such a lovely person. And so I felt like it was such an honour to be like her. So when I found out that my grandpa wasn't biologically my grandpa, I kind of had I feel emotional just talking about it. I kind of had a bit of an existential crisis and felt as though everything that I had been told my whole life was not true. And I also felt lost just because the woman that I had wanted so badly to be like, it was kind of impossible that I was like her, if that makes sense. It wasn't impossible because, of course, you can develop traits that are similar to others in your family and things like that, but we didn't have the blood ties. So then my discovery of like, okay, where do I come from started. And the reality is that I started that journey because I wanted to know if I came from good people. Because I came from good people, as in like my grandpa Tom's family were good people. They were well liked, they were kind, loving, welcoming, all of those things that you want in your family. So to find out that I wasn't really from them hurt. And so I wanted to know, who did I come from? And what were they like? And, were they loved? Did they love each other? All of those kind of things. So when you're doing your DNA, you kind of go researching a little bit and you think, okay, let's just start and see what I can find out first. So the very first thing that I could see was I put in the surname that I suspected, and then up popped all these other surnames that were associated with it, and trees of people that had the surname I put in and trees of these other people, and could go back pretty far actually, which was, great to see. So when I didn't see my grandpa Tom in my tree, I had to think about what I knew about my grandma's life. And a few months before I did my DNA, I found out from an auntie that my grandma and my grandpa had split up for a little while and that she had gone to live with another man. And I asked her at the time, do you remember his name? And she did. And so she told me his name. So when I couldn't see my grandpa, my hubby said to me, why don't you put in the name of the boyfriend of your grandma and see if that comes up? And so I did, and it did. And it was lucky, really. Lucky that my auntie had told me the name. Lucky I had scribbled it down. Lucky I knew that he existed, all of those kind of things. And so, we have to look for the blessings, and I was happy that I knew who it was, even if, it was a shock and not really something anybody wants to find out, but I knew that there was a person there, and I knew that that person existed, and that at some stage in their life there was a love between my grandma and him, because they had been together years before my mum was born. So that showed me that there was an interest between them to rekindle something when my mum was born. And I explained it to my mum as like, even though my grandma was back with my grandpa by the time she had my mum, it wasn't a one-off night that she had been with this other gentleman. Because my mum was born in 1953, and my understanding is that my grandma and this man were together around about 1951, which meant that they had been together and then maybe they separated for a bit, but they got back together again before my mum was, conceived. So it wasn't like a one-off fling. And I did say that to my mum at the time because I wanted to comfort my mum and make sure that she knew that, they obviously did like each other and wanted to be together or spend some time together, at least romantically, and that she didn't have to feel like she didn't come from love. There could have been feelings between them. If you've ever been with somebody and then broken up with them, then you've probably had that experience of like the toying to and from, like we've broken up, but we might get together again. We've broken up, but we might get together again. And obviously they weren't supposed to be together. And in the end, one of them just said, nah, we're done. This is not working. Which is fine. It allowed my grandpa to come back into the life of my grandma, but it did help to know that they had some type of connection. So following that, you want to know where he came from. So I looked at my history and his history, and I was really interested in finding out, what were his parents like? What were their parents like? So my grandparents, if that makes sense. And the stories that I read in the newspaper were interesting because I was using Trove online. And so the stories that I read in the newspaper were really interesting. They gave quite a lot of detail about the family, at least sort of 4 generations back. So my great-great-grandparents. And I was able to piece together little bits and pieces of their lives. So from that, I got in contact with other people that I matched with on Ancestry. And they told me what they knew about the family that we had come from. And I can't tell you the relief that I felt when one gentleman turned around to me and he said, I remember your great-grandma. He's quite elderly. And he said to me, like, I remember your great-grandma. I remember when I was little, I used to go to her house and she would always have a beautiful smile on her face and she would always make us feel welcome. And it meant so much because I didn't want her to be a grouch, I had a beautiful great-grandma who I still have as a beautiful great-grandma in my mind, but we're not blood related. And it's so nice to know that the one I am blood related to was also considered kind, also welcoming. And so immediately I was able to think, you know what? She was always smiling and welcoming people into her house. I want to be like her. I want to do the same. It was very similar to what I already felt from my non-biological great-grandma about wanting to have people in my presence that I could cook for and entertain and keep company and make feel welcome. I was able to add of my great-grandma into my being. So I would say to you, if you're discovering new relatives that you didn't know you had and you're feeling a bit unsure about how you want to incorporate them into your life, then just remember they make up pieces of who we are and we can take the good, leave the bad, and develop more with the knowledge that we have of them. If you're searching for people right now, then I wish you all the best with your journey. It is a tricky journey to be on sometimes, but it is a wonderful journey no matter the outcome. And I wish you all the very best with it. If you have enjoyed what you've heard here at all today, then I would love it if you would like and subscribe, and I will see you again in the very near future. Bye for now.